YouTube, B with B Smokehouse back with you here. This is what we're gonna do today for today's cook, or tonight's cook rather. I've got a 6-pound brisket. I've got some black pepper. I've got some kosher salt. I've got a fish fillet knife. I've got a slicer knife. And I got a chef's knife. I'm gonna be trimming this up. I've got uncovered hand to handle my knives, and I've got a gloved hand. What we're gonna do, we're gonna smoke this low and slow for about from 225 degrees to 250 degrees, probably about 8 to 10 hours. And then we're gonna make us some barbecue baked potatoes with chopped beef, AKA chopped brisket. All right, this is a tiny brisket I found at one of my local stores. I got it because it met some of the selection requirements that I usually go through to pick my briskets. Now, it's really small, doesn't have a defined point or flat. They kind of run into each other. This would be considered the flat muscle. This would be considered the point muscle. Not gonna do too much trimming on this because there's not really that much meat here. The fat on this brisket is pretty soft, and that's what you're looking for. There is a hard knob of fat on the bottom. We'll go ahead and cut that off here shortly. Let me show you what I do to go ahead and get this prepared for the smoker. So this is usually known as the mohawk, and most briskets is a little bit bigger than this. It's gonna burn, so we usually cut it down. You cut it down. The whole purpose of trimming the brisket, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get a more aerodynamic piece of meat. All right, the theory is this. I trim my brisket so there's more being served to my family, less waste. The better trim typically renders a better product. See, a lot of this is, I thought this was soft fat, but it wasn't, so we're gonna have to get all of this off too. My knife's a bit dull. I'm gonna leave this alone. So I don't want to dig too much into this brisket. This fat feels fine. But this we'll go ahead and get rid of. Most people just think that when you're cooking a brisket, you just put it on and you cook. Now, I am a backyard cook. I have not participated in any competitions. However, I'm usually pretty aggressive with my trim. I want to be able to preserve as much meat as possible on this brisket because that's what me and my family is going to eat. So you might see people go a little bit more aggressive than I do. You might see people do competition trims. I've seen people just take the brisket out of the cryovac, that's the plastic package this was in, and go to town, not trim anything. I've seen that. However, they're left with a lot of fat on their brisket that no one's gonna eat that, all right? So in the end, somebody's gonna end up cutting it off of the finished product and throwing it away, so why not do it from the get-go? So this fat is okay. I'm filling as I go. So this is a little hard. We're gonna get rid of that. But as I fill this, you gotta get real intimate with your brisket. As I fill it, I am filling for any veins. I'm filling for any hard fat, anything that would be unpleasurable to the palate. All right, this looks to be okay. I'm not gonna, there's already a gouge here. More than likely that was from where the butcher cut it. We're gonna leave it alone because, I mean, you can dive into this and be trimming for 2 or 3 hours. I don't plan on doing that tonight. We're gonna get the big stuff off and we're gonna leave it alone. I'm gonna show you how to get a great product, whether it's for getting slices or if you're gonna do like I'm gonna do and create a barbecue baked potato. So just stay tuned. Because this is not such a big piece of brisket, I'm not gonna go all crazy trimming. I wanna preserve as much fat on this as possible. Fat carries flavor, and with this, fat is moisture as well. All right. Now, some of these edges are thin. We're gonna round this off, so I'm not worried about this. So this, got my slicer. It's the hard fat I'm speaking of. This is harder than this other fat here. That seems to be okay. That's gonna be it. I'm gonna flip it over and then we'll get to shaping the brisket. Let's see. I'm gonna leave majority of this fat on. So because I'm going to be chopping majority of this brisket to load our baked potatoes, I'm going to leave majority of the stuff here. Now, if it's stuff like this is a hard fat. You're not gonna eat that. Nor is it gonna render. I'm only leaving fat on that is gonna render, and you can feel the difference. You can. So I came across this. This was pretty hard. So now we're gonna get into it with our slicer. Get it off there. All right. And here's some more. That naturally wants to come up. Naturally wants to separate, and it is hard. I'm gonna get that off of there. So here's a bit. It helps, especially whether it's a small brisket or a big brisket. Put your hand under the brisket, bring that fat up, and then slice it off. This doesn't seem too bad. All right, I'm gonna leave the rest of this on. That's pretty soft, and it does run deep. I can feel it. All right, so now let's get rid of this. So one of the other things I get a lot of questions about, hey, what do you do with the trimmings and stuff from your brisket? There are quite a few things you can do. So I can take these pieces of fat. I don't think I'm gonna do it for this brisket because there's simply not enough trimmings I'm gonna have. I'm trying to maximize my product with this particular brisket. This is just for me and my family. But I could take this fat, I could slice it down into cubes. I could put it on the stove with a little bit of water, bring it to a boil. Once the water evaporates, then I will have what's known as beef fat, AKA beef tallow. Tallow is like, I mean, most people would describe tallow as manna from the God. Manna from God. It can be used for everything. In fact, some of your favorite restaurant chains used to fry their French fries in beef tallow. So yeah, beef tallow. What I typically do with beef tallow, I'll usually take it, and before I wrap my brisket around 175, 180 degrees, I would cover this brisket in tallow. I use butcher paper. I would also cover that butcher paper in tallow, and yeah, it makes for a moister, juicier product, and it tastes delicious. All right, so let me get rid of this, because I need the rest of the space on my board. All right, now we are going to get to so now, when I first started talking, I said, hey, we want to make this a more aerodynamic product. So typically what you'll see, squares, in my estimation, and from my experience on my smoker, squared items don't do well because these squared ends tend to burn. Now, when we trim a brisket, when we shape a brisket, what we're trying to do, we're trying to, again, maximize our yield. This particular edge is really thin. So when I shape this brisket, I'm gonna knock that off and make for a more rounder appearance, all right? I won't be throwing these trims away. Even the trims I set in my sink, I'm gonna keep. I'll find something to do with them. But the point is this: the point of using this big piece of meat is to maximize your yield. Let me show you what I mean. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and let me start. So you'll see most people, they'll go ahead and draw it out the shape. And draw it out, draw it out, draw it out, draw it out. And this thin part, because the issue is on a stick burner, it's gonna burn. So you don't wanna put it in there. So we're gonna go ahead and knob it off. And it might take several strokes. So this is a 6-pound brisket. Probably by the time I finish with it, it might be around 5, maybe 4, right under 5 pounds. So, you know, it's not gonna take all day. I like smaller briskets in comparison to big ones. I've got other items I like to do during the day instead of just manning a smoker. So yeah. But the trim, most people will tell you, especially here in Texas, that, you know, the trim itself is more important than the cook. I mean, part of that is true. I don't know that anybody wants to be chewing on a raw piece of brisket, so the cook itself is just as important. So I'm getting through some of this fat. And then we're gonna finish rounding it off. A little bit more round. I might get rid of this knob down here, but we've uncovered some other fat. It's been here, but again, I'm not gonna take off all this fat because again, we're dealing with a smaller brisket, and I know that it's not covered in fat like a larger brisket would be. Again, I'm taking this, my trimmings, not getting rid of it, put it in my sink. So we've got a nice neat edge. Get rid of some of this overhang because again, we're just making the brisket a little bit more linear. It's all right. I'm filling. I like that edge that we created. And then here we might create another edge. I've seen some people take scissors. I've seen people take scissors and knock this edge off. I'm not gonna get that for night. This is not a competition. This is for me and my family to eat. I'll be getting up here in a few hours to put it on. Let's see what else can be done. Simple, you know, some people who post videos like this on YouTube make this seem overwhelmingly hard. I can tell you, you know, one of the other guys I watch is Aaron Franklin. I watched Aaron Franklin when I was a kid on PBS. And one of the things he says that I absolutely wholeheartedly agree with is that the only way to make good brisket is to make bad brisket. I have certainly made my share of bad brisket, especially, you know, my first few times making this. However, this is more than, I think this is brisket for me, like probably somewhere in the 30s, 40s. So by no means I am an expert. However, I know how my smoker works and I know how I cook my briskets, right? But yeah, you'll see some people do, some people have some things they stick to, some musts they follow. When you're dealing with a stick burner, and you're burning wood instead of charcoal, you got to be flexible. You won't hear me stand up here and tell you that I'm going to be on 225 all day. The wood doesn't burn that way, all right? So let me finish trimming this. then I'll get back with you. I think we might leave this fast. We might leave that. Let's see. Let's see where we at. Let's get to the edge. Let's create a new edge on this. Let's see how far that fat runs. So typically, when you're trimming a brisket, usually most pitmasters are trying to trim this fat to about 1/8 of an inch. That requires a sharp knife, and you want your meat to be extra cold. I'm going to leave this as is. I don't mind this bit of fat here because, like I said, I'm really taking this and we're going to make, again, chopped beef to fill up some barbecue baked potatoes. I'm going to stop right there, and then we're going to get a binder on this. In this case, the binder I'm going to be using will be yellow mustard. A binder, when we talk about barbecue, is what you use to get your rub to stick. In this case, we're keeping it simple. We're going with a Central Texas mixture of kosher salt and black pepper. All right, I have used commercial rubs. I find that using specifically this brand of black pepper and kosher salt, I get a bit better product. Even though we're smoking the meat, we still want to taste this awesome beef. Now, again, I'm not going to make this some scientific video. Maybe in a later episode, I'll get into the different grades of beef here in the U.S. That makes a big difference. Again, if you want to end with a good product, you start with a good product, and then we can get into talking about prime grade beef, right? And the lesser levels of beef. We can do that. I don't exactly know what this one is. I believe this is Select, I believe. The store I bought it from, they didn't have them labeled. So I'm going to do what I do, show you tips and tricks. Although this might not have the best intramuscular fat, I'm going to show you ways to keep this juicy. And one of those ways, we're going to keep this fat on the top. We're not going to get rid of it like I would if this were a 15 to 20 pound pack of brisket, right? So let me show you what we're going to do next. Binder, standard yellow mustard. People use nothing sometimes. If your meat's tacky, my meat's tacky, I don't have to use anything. But here's what I find. I find that seasoning your brisket the night before, especially salting it down and putting your other seasonings on there, put it in the fridge. I find that the overnight rest in the fridge with your seasonings on, they help in the smoke ring, which is a smoke ring necessary? Not really. Most people on pellet smokers, which I have a pellet smoker, and stick burners, like what this will be going on, you will get a smoke ring because you are burning, you are actually burning wood. Now, there are also some other items that help with smoke rings that you can put into your rub if you make your own rub. Celery salt is one of those. The nitrites and nitrates found in that salt will help you get that smoke ring that most are looking for. But again, this is being shredded. We're not getting that difficult with this. I have a bigger brisket out in the freezer that probably here in the next few weeks I'll take out, and we're gonna smoke it, and then I'll do a whole in-depth tutorial about it. So again, you don't have to use anything for a binder. I'm using mustard tonight. I've seen people use all type of stuff. Hot sauce, sriracha. I've seen mayonnaise. That's a new one. New kid on the block. I've actually used mayonnaise. It works pretty good. It's a fat, so it does its job. But again, binder is what helps helps your meat, helps your rub stick to your meat. I've got to determine which side of this is going to be my top. So this is going to be the bottom. You always want to rub down and season your bottom first. Remember, a lot of this is about presentation, right? So we're not gonna go too heavy with the mustard. Then we rub it in, nothing too hard. I'm sure. And mustard is usually something we all have in our fridge at the house. So I use mustard today. And so we rub it down. Now, will you taste the mustard? I haven't found that to be the case. After this piece of meat is done, I haven't seen that. Haven't tasted it. All right, so now we're gonna go in and salt the brisket down. So this is still, I call it a small brisket. This is still a big piece of meat. All right. This salt and pepper is what's gonna help you get your bark. So you don't wanna be too shy with it. I pat it in. Again, it's called a rub, but we're not rubbing nothing over here. We're gonna make sure we get the edges. You'll hear some people say you can't over salt a brisket. I'm telling you, that is a lie. I've tasted somebody's brisket that they over salted. All right, you just gotta use a lot of salt. So we're getting the edges. Again, I want this thing barked up. When I say bark, I'll show you what the bark should look like once this has cooked and rested. So now I got some in my glove. I'm gonna go around the edges. That's gonna be enough for this side. Now we're gonna go. Now it's time for the black pepper. All right. We're gonna hit it with the black pepper. Black pepper, we can go heavy. Ain't no real limit. What a lot of people don't understand about black pepper on a smoker, they'll see, man, that's a lot of black pepper. Well, you have to remember this piece of meat is gonna be cooking for an average of 8 to 10 to 12, 14 hours. The harshness of the black pepper, the rawness of the black pepper is gonna be cooked out. And I'm gonna put a little bit more because the black pepper is also what helps to establish our bark. You kind of need that. Yep. So I like this. It's transparent. I can still see through my rub and see my meat. I still see bits in yellow of the mayonnaise. Of the mustard. My apologies. Now we're gonna go and do the same thing to the edges. We hit the edges, get all around the edges. And again, this is not salt, this is pepper. You want a heavy layer of pepper on. Some people will go a little bit coarser grain on their pepper than this. And that's fine. You still get the same results. I like this brand of pepper. So this is what I use. I've used other brands. They come out just fine, but again, this is what I use. This is what we keep in the house. So again, I'm picking up all this, getting it on there. You know. One other combination as far as a binder I've seen, and I think it's more of a Central Texas deal, is I've seen Pitmasters mix dill pickle juice and mustard. And they swear by it. I've used it before, it's pretty good. But again, purpose of a binder is to get your rub to stick. That's the purpose of a binder. Now, I know that mustard has a high acidity level. I know that dill pickle juice has a high acidity level as well. So, I mean, it could assist in tenderization of the meat over a long period of time. However, I haven't done that research, so. All right, looking good. This is gonna be at the top. We have this gash. I'm gonna cook it as it is. I'm not gonna worry about that. So we're gonna go salt. Another thing I noticed too about when you do a large piece of meat like this, being organized. What do I mean by that? Putting your seasoning on in a pattern which you recognize you've covered as much of the meat as possible. Now, again, we can get into a whole class about the salt I'm using. You'll see some people use other brands and varieties of kosher salt. That's fine, but they are going to do the same thing. However, you must realize, so this brand of kosher salt, the flakes are a bit bigger. Over a large piece of meat, I can use a little bit more than I can use, say, iodized table salt. Iodized table salt, I would want to use way less because table salt is a saltier product than this kosher salt. All right, just some things to keep in mind. Now, can you use table salt in this? Indeed, you can, but you would need to use way less, or else you will find that you've oversalted your meat. So I ate somebody's brisket that did not realize that table salt was saltier than kosher salt. They went ham using table salt, and it was salty. Yep, it was definitely salty. All right, so I like to get a nice heavy coverage with the black pepper, and you still can see through the meat. You still can see the meat through the seasonings, and that's gonna be about it for tonight. So, and I add a little bit more. Again, you really can't have too much pepper. And remember, your pepper and salt, we using hickory wood. It's something about hickory, your hardwoods, hickory, mesquite. I typically am a fan of oak, post oak. We're gonna let this sit, let it adhere. But it's something about when salt and pepper combines with the other seasoning. The other seasoning I'm speaking of would be your smoke. In this case, or the case I use wood in my smoker, we are really using the smoke and wood as a seasoning. So it's yet another layer of flavor. If you think of it that way, controlling your fire, controlling your temps is not a problem. Now, in the smoker I'm using, again, we're gonna rock this from about 225 degrees to 250. Because this is a smaller smoker, I don't want to exceed 250. I don't want to go to 275 because that'll be too hot. We're gonna let this sit here for a few minutes. I'm gonna clean up. The next time you'll see me is when I'm getting ready to start a fire and put this baby on. I'll show you how I start my fire. I'll show you in the direction I'm gonna place this based off the convective flow of my smoker. Very important to understand. And I'll show you how I typically run my smoker and maintaining a smaller fire, a smaller coal bed. Other than that, I will see you guys first thing in the morning.